Vivienne Carlisle placed her hand on Oliver's shoulder when the man ordered the boy into the black carriage waiting in the manor courtyard. Leopold the Duke came down the steps, bent to the boy's level, lowered the man's voice with one quiet command, and asked Oliver whom he wished to sit beside. Oliver pointed past the horses toward the servants' passage. "Follow me. Your Grace, not that carriage." The coach door stood open. The man was her late husband's half-brother. The coachman and two servants watched. Vivienne knew what a struggle would look like in their eyes, a lady's maid in grey-brown dress and white linen cap, grappling with a gentleman, while affidavits called her excitable and unfit. So she did not seize her son. She looked at the Duke instead. "If you follow him, please look at everything he shows you before you sign anything." Leopold looked from Oliver to the carriage. "Lead the way." Oliver took them through the servants' corridor to the little music room where Vivienne sometimes taught the household children. He went straight to the mahogany metronome, turned it over, and worked one ink-stained finger beneath the cracked bass. They said father left Mama nothing, he said. They forgot where he put the paper. The bass came loose with a snap. Oliver drew out a folded yellowed sheet and gave it to Leopold. Vivienne watched him read. It was the copy she had feared lost, a family settlement made before her husband's death, securing a modest stipend and confirming that Oliver was to remain in her care unless lawful authority decided otherwise. Leopold reached the witness line. He read it once, then again. The man who sent that carriage witnessed this settlement. He believes no magistrate will trouble himself to read a servant's paper. Leopold folded the sheet along its old creases. Then he has misjudged me. The carriage leaves empty. Oliver remains here while I examine the petition. By the next morning, Leopold's notes named the petitioner Maxwell Mowbray. He offered Vivienne the vacant dower house and paid music copying and tutoring work so her roof and wages would not depend upon favor. She accepted after he wrote down 3 conditions. Oliver was not to be questioned without her. Maxwell was not to enter the dower house, and Leopold's authority ended with the petition. Those are limits, Mrs. Carlisle, not favors. I accept them. That afternoon, Leopold opened the sworn statements at her sitting-room table. Vivienne noticed that 3 independent witnesses used the same phrase, excitable influence. She poured his tea slowly. The thin stream struck porcelain, steam lifted between them, while Leopold read the 3 passages again, one after another. He straightened the pages until their edges met. Identical words are suspicious, he said at last. They are not proof. No, Vivienne said, setting the pot down. But they tell us where to look next. The carriage had been stopped. Now came the harder question. Could Maxwell's papers survive 2 readers who distrusted them for different reasons? By the time Leopold left that first afternoon, the dower house had begun to feel less like borrowed shelter. It stood beyond a thin belt of oaks, close enough that the manor chimneys showed above the branches, and far enough that no visitor could pretend he had wandered to its door by accident. Its rooms were modest, a kitchen, 2 bedchambers, a sitting room, and a little parlor with a piano that had not been tuned in years. Vivienne approved of the distance more than the furniture. She set Oliver's metronome on the parlor mantel, checked the back latch herself, and placed her music paper in the desk Leopold's housekeeper had sent down. Oliver, who had no patience for the distinctions adults put into ink, claimed the small bedroom overlooking the orchard and asked whether the carriage could return in the night. Not without half the estate hearing it, Vivienne told him. That answer was true enough to let him sleep. 2 days later, Leopold returned with notes from his first inquiries and spread the same 3 affidavits across her table, each page placed exactly parallel to the next. Vivienne poured tea. Do they become more truthful when aligned? Lined, no, he said. Only easier to compare. That is almost disappointing. His mouth altered by the smallest degree. With anyone else she might have called it a smile. With Leopold she reserved judgment. The repeated phrase is suspicious, he said. It is still not enough. I need to know whether it came from ordinary legal drafting or from one man directing 3 witnesses. Then begin with the witness most likely to explain it. The former stableman, Leopold touched that statement. He also cites an incident in which you threw a vase at a wall. Vivienne took her seat. I did. Why? Because my husband had locked Oliver in a dressing room to teach him not to interrupt gentlemen at dinner. The room went still. Vivienne regretted the answer at once, not because it was false, but because she had spent years choosing which truths could be safely said, and had just given one away before deciding what it might cost. Leopold did not soften his voice into pity. Was Oliver in the room when you threw it? No. Was anyone injured? No. Then the incident proves you broke a vase. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. That conclusion does not flatter the affidavit. I am not employed to flatter it. There it was again, the unsettling quality that drew her attention more effectively than charm would have done. He did not improve facts because he liked the result. He reduced them until only what could stand remained. Vivienne tapped the former stableman's statement. Did you meet him when he delivered this? I did. What did you notice that he answered badly? About his coat. Leopold's expression became almost affronted. His coat was brown. The right cuff was worn through. The left was not. He has been doing rough work since losing his stable place, and he has no money for a new coat. When he stood in your hall, he kept looking toward the service passage. Vivienne had seen such looks all her life, servants measuring who might overhear dependents calculating which door belonged to a creditor. Wives judging whether a husband had entered a room by the silence that preceded him. Leopold's gaze shifted from her to the affidavit. She watched recognition settle, not certainty. He did look toward the passage, he said. He was not waiting for tea. That still does not prove payment. No. It proves fear may be more useful to Maxwell than loyalty. You found the repeated words. I am telling you which man is most likely to explain them. Leopold tapped the paper once. That is a hypothesis. So was your belief that 3 men independently developed a passion for the phrase excitable influence? His eyes lifted to hers. For one suspended second, she wondered whether she had gone too far. Then he said, I stand corrected on the likelihood of coincidence. Not you are clever. Not for a servant you observe remarkably well. Simply a correction offered, as though her judgment had earned the same courtesy as his own. Warmth rose under her collar. Annoying, uninvited warmth. Oliver entered carrying a plate with 2 pieces of bread, and stopped when he saw the papers. Are you deciding where I live again? Vivienne reached for him, but Leopold answered first. No. We are deciding whether 3 grown men copied one another. Oliver considered this. Do grown men always need 6 pages to decide where a boy wants breakfast? Leopold looked at the affidavits. Vivienne pressed her lips together. No, he said at last. That appears to be a defect peculiar to grown men. Oliver nodded satisfied, and carried his bread to the window. The laugh escaped Vivienne before she could arrange it into something quieter. Leopold looked at her, then not at the widow in a petition or the maid named in 3 hostile statements, but at the woman who had just laughed in his face. The look lasted only a moment. It was enough to make her hope the next question took longer than necessary. Over the following weeks, the petition ceased to be the only clock in the house. Vivienne copied music in the mornings and taught in the afternoons. Twice a week, the head gardener's 2 daughters crossed the oak path with their lesson books held against their chests. Oliver practiced with them when he could bear it, and disappeared to the orchard when he could not. Leopold continued to visit with questions. At first, every visit came with a paper in his hand. By the 3rd week, he occasionally arrived with no paper at all. On a wet Thursday, he found Oliver attacking a minuet with more courage than accuracy. The mahogany metronome ticked on the mantel. Leopold took the corner chair. He endured 6 measures before his fingers began tapping against the wooden arm. 1, 2, 3, 4. You are ahead. Oliver stopped. I cannot hear the music when you count at me, Your Grace. I am not counting at you. I am supplying the measure. You are supplying too much of it. Vivienne turned away before Leopold could see her smile. She lowered the metronome weight until the clicks came far apart. Again, she told Oliver. Leopold frowned. You have made it slower than the score requires. Yes. Then the metronome is wrong. The metronome is exact. That is not the same thing. He folded his arms. I suspect I am about to become an object lesson. His Grace is excellent evidence that rhythm and music are different matters. Oliver grinned. Leopold's brows rose. I object. I shall enter the objection in no record whatsoever. Oliver tried again. At the slower pace, his shoulders loosened. The bow stopped scratching at every turn. Vivienne let him finish the phrase, then moved the weight 1 notch higher. There. Keep that shape. This time he found the melody. It was not beautiful. It was recognizably a melody which was triumph enough. When Vivienne turned, Leopold was watching Oliver rather than the clock. He had come to ask about a date on an affidavit. The question had been answered 20 minutes earlier, yet he remained in the chair through every poor note because he had told Oliver he would hear the piece to the end. That small fidelity disturbed her more than a grand gesture might have done. A few days later, she had reason to show him the other half of their quarrel. The gardener's daughters arrived with their mother, who had plainly heard too much gossip in the main house and not enough truth. The woman stood stiffly in the parlor, uncertain whether accepting tea from a former lady's maid lodged in a ducal dower house might place her on the wrong side of society. Vivienne saw the hesitation before the woman spoke. She also saw the elder girl watching her mother, prepared to be ashamed of wanting the lesson. So Vivienne moved the chairs. She put Oliver beside the younger child at the music stand, seated the mother nearest the open door, and gave Leopold, who had arrived halfway through the awkwardness, the least important chair in the room. He looked at the chair, then at her. Your Grace, Vivienne said pleasantly, would you hold these pages? The girls lose their place when the wind takes them. A duke holding loose music while 2 children played badly was not a declaration. It was better. It made the room ordinary. The gardener's wife relaxed enough to accept tea. Only when the lesson ended did Leopold hand back the pages. You moved me. I moved everyone. I noticed. You were meant to. His gaze sharpened with amusement. And what conclusion was I intended to reach? That people tell the truth more easily when they know where they may leave. He glanced toward the chair beside the door, then back to her. Useful. Not proof observable conduct, he corrected. She laughed. You are learning. I was about to say the same of you. The children began arguing over whose turn it was to wind the metronome. The room filled with small voices, wet cloaks, untidy music, and the smell of tea. Vivienne caught Leopold looking at her across it all, not with pity, not with the guarded courtesy of a man protecting a dependent. His attention had the same concentration. He gave a difficult contradiction. Her pulse changed. She should have looked away. Instead, she held his gaze until Oliver called for help with the metronome key. That evening, after Leopold had gone, Vivienne found herself listening for hoofbeats on the lane. There was no affidavit left unanswered. She listened anyway. Before the 6th week, a messenger brought a fresh affidavit from Maxwell's solicitor. Leopold carried it to the dower house himself. He did not sit. It is regular on its face, he said. Sworn before another magistrate. Maxwell asks for 1 supervised interview with Oliver before the family meeting. Vivienne felt the room contract around the paper. No. Leopold's eyes lifted. I would be present. So would my clerk. No. Mrs. Carlisle. He will not threaten Oliver. That is the difficulty. She rose from the writing desk. He will speak softly. He will make obedience sound like kindness and shame sound like duty. He will tell Oliver that a good son protects his mother's reputation by doing what Maxwell wants. Leopold glanced down at the affidavit. A supervised interview is a narrow request. There is no recorded physical threat. You asked me what people do when paper fails to explain them. I am telling you. I have heard you. That is not the same as believing me. The words landed harder than she intended. Leopold's jaw did not tighten. His fingers merely straightened the sheet against the table edge. If I refuse every facially proper request from the petitioner, he said, I turn this inquiry into my preference. I cannot do that. And if you admit him because the request is neat enough, I will stop him at the first improper word. Vivienne nearly laughed, but there was nothing amusing in it. You will not know which word is improper until Oliver has already heard it. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Leopold said, The interview will occur tomorrow morning. 10 minutes. Library. Door open. Clerk present. The old instinct to arrange every danger before it reached her face came back at once. Vivienne gathered the music sheets into a perfect stack because her hands needed a task. As you command, Your Grace. He flinched at the title, as if she had used it as a weapon. She meant to. The next morning, Vivienne waited in the small room adjoining Hawkridge's library. The connecting door stood open far enough for the clerk to pass between rooms. From her chair, she could see one arm of Oliver's leather seat and the edge of Leopold's desk. Maxwell entered without haste. He looked respectable enough to be believed by anyone who mistook polish for harmlessness. Oliver, he said gently, I am pleased to see you well. Vivienne's fingers tightened around the handkerchief in her lap. I confess I am sorry to see you living upon the charity of strangers. Leopold's voice came at once. Mr. Mowbray, the boy's welfare, not his mother's station. Of course, Your Grace, they are naturally connected. Vivienne could hear the smile in it. Then Maxwell addressed Oliver again. A family survives because each person understands his duty. A good son does not create scandal for his mother. He does not make her dependent upon a gentleman who may tire of generosity. You would not want people to say unkind things of her because you were too selfish to come home to your proper family, would you? Silence. Not an accusation, not a threat Leopold could have struck from a page before it was spoken, a trap built from a child's love. Vivienne was on her feet before she knew she had moved. From the library came Oliver's breath, too quick and shallow. Then his voice. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. He had done that when he was smaller after his father's punishments, counted whatever rhythm he could find, until the room felt measurable again. Vivienne reached the connecting door. Leopold's chair scraped hard against the floor. This interview is ended, Maxwell protested. Your Grace, I granted 10 minutes under supervision. I now revoke the leave. You cannot withdraw it merely because the boy dislikes a difficult truth. Leopold's reply was quiet enough that Vivienne had to lean toward the doorway. Clerk, enter that Mr. Mowbray used the interview to place responsibility for his mother's reputation upon an 8-year-old child. No further interview is to occur while this matter remains before me. Maxwell's politeness vanished. You are making yourself ridiculous over a maid. That observation is not evidence. You may go. A moment later, Maxwell crossed the adjoining room. His face was white with anger. He looked at Vivienne, then at the open door behind her, as if calculating whether one more sentence might recover his advantage. She gave him none. When he had gone, she entered the library. Oliver was still counting. Vivienne knelt beside him, put both hands around his, and did not tell him to stop. She counted with him until his breathing slowed. 1, 2, 3, 4. Leopold remained several feet away. Only when Oliver leaned against Vivienne's shoulder did Leopold speak. The leave is withdrawn. The clerk has entered the reason. Vivienne looked up. He did not say he had meant well. I treated a valid paper as safer than your warning, he said. Oliver paid for that error. It was a failure of my judgment. The precision of the admission hurt more than an excuse would have. It left her nothing easy to fight. What changes, she asked. No further private or supervised approach by Maxwell to Oliver through this estate. At the family meeting, I will test his conduct, not merely the form of his papers. And if another affidavit arrives, I will read it. I will not mistake reading it for obeying it. Oliver's fingers loosened around hers. Vivienne sat back on her heels. There was one fact she had kept from Leopold, because keeping knowledge had once been the only kind of safety she possessed. She hated surrendering it. I withheld a witness. Leopold's expression altered, but he did not interrupt. A former coachman who once drove Maxwell on the day 2 of those statements were arranged. He heard Maxwell give the former stableman the phrase he was to use. I kept the man out of it because Maxwell still has influence over his livelihood. Will he speak if protected? Yes. Then I can arrange that protection before I ask him. Vivienne looked down at Oliver's hair. I should have told you why I was keeping him back. Instead, I decided what you could safely know. Leopold's answer came after a pause. You had reason to be cautious. That is not the same as being right. No, he said. It is not. She almost smiled at the echo. There in the library, where both of them had just been proved wrong in different ways, the rivalry changed shape. Leopold had corrected an order before defending his pride. Vivienne had given up information before she could arrange every consequence. Neither act made trust comfortable. It made trust possible. That evening, Vivienne carried the metronome up the path to the manor. The study lamp was burning when she was shown in. Leopold sat behind his desk with the petition open before him and a clean sheet waiting at his right hand. She set the metronome between them. I am not going to Friday's meeting. He put down his pen. You are entitled to be there. I know. Maxwell will use your absence if he can. He uses my presence when he can. Leopold said nothing. Vivienne had spent years entering rooms with 3 plans and leaving herself an unseen door. Even now she could think of 6 ways to manage Friday Place, a sympathetic servant in the corridor, make certain the solicitor heard the right piece of household gossip, prepare Oliver's account, and insist it be read at the proper moment. She was tired of living as though every truth required choreography. I do not want to sit in a room while men discuss whether I have earned my own child, she said. I do not want Oliver brought there to prove that he loves me. You take the petition. I keep Oliver my work and whatever comes after. Leopold's gaze rested on her face, not on the metronome. You want me to conduct the inquiry without calling you? Yes. And the former coachman use him if his livelihood is protected first. It will be. That is all. He turned the metronome once beneath his fingertips, then pushed it back toward her. This belongs in your music room. It is evidence. It was evidence before it became Oliver's metronome again. I know where it is if I need it. Their fingers touched when she took it. The contact lasted no more than a second. What unsettled Vivienne was not heat or surprise, but the care with which Leopold withdrew his hand, as though her trust had defined the edge of the desk more clearly than any rule. I will handle the petition, he said. Stay with Oliver. I intended to. I assumed you did. There was the dry man again, intact beneath everything else. She carried the metronome home. 2 days later, the black carriage returned to Hawkridge. This time Oliver never saw it. Vivienne kept him at the dower house with his violin, his arithmetic, and a promise that she would tell him when the meeting was finished. She went no farther than the adjoining sitting room at the manor where the library door stood partly open. Maxwell had brought a solicitor and a packet thick enough to impress anyone who counted pages instead of contradictions. Before the inquiry began, he tried another currency. Your Grace, he said, the county is already curious about your interest in this woman. Continue, and people will say the Duke of Hawkridge houses a maid and her son for private amusement. Give me the boy, and the matter becomes a family concern again. Your name need not be attached to it. Vivienne's first instinct was immediate and practiced. Which servants had heard, which families would repeat it, who could be made to mention her wages, her written employment. The separate dower house, she could feel the social board arranging itself in her mind. Then she stopped. That was the old bargain. If someone threatened her name, she must manage every mouth before it opened. She rose and stepped to the library doorway. Leopold looked toward her. "Do not purchase quiet with my name, Your Grace. Nothing more." She returned to the sitting room and left the door as it had been one hand's breadth open. For a moment, nobody in the library spoke. Then Leopold said, "My reputation is not evidence, Mr. Mowbray, nor is Mrs. Carlisle's station. Sit down." Maxwell muttered something Vivienne could not catch. Leopold's reply was clearer. "We are beginning." Vivienne sat. The carriage wheels were visible through the far window beyond the library, black against the gravel. 6 weeks earlier, she had watched that door stand open for her son. Now Oliver was nowhere near it. That difference mattered before a single ruling had been made. From the next room, Vivienne heard the first sheet of paper slide across the library table. Leopold's voice followed. "Your affidavit states that your brother made no provision recognizing Mrs. Carlisle's place in Oliver's care. That is correct. Then explain your signature." Silence. Vivienne could picture the yellowed settlement between them. She knew the exact slant of the witness line because she had stared at it on nights when possession of the paper seemed more important than sleep. Maxwell recovered first. "The arrangement is old. That was not my question. It was never intended to prevent the family from acting for the boy's welfare." "Again, not my question. Did you witness this settlement?" "Settlement," a chair creaked. "Yes." "And when you swore there was no such family arrangement, had you forgotten your own signature?" Maxwell's solicitor intervened. Leopold stopped him with a question about the date, then another about when the first carriage had been ordered. Each answer narrowed the room. The solicitor's papers, which had been shifting softly until then, went still. Through the open door, Vivienne saw him lower his eyes to Maxwell's signature and cease arranging the packet, as though its thickness could still save the case. Vivienne felt no triumph. She felt the peculiar stillness of waiting, while a door she had chosen not to enter remained open beside her. The repeated phrase came next. "Excitable influence." Leopold read. "It appears in 3 statements taken on separate days." "Who supplied the words, 'no one'?" Leopold called the former coachman. The man's boots sounded heavy on the library boards. His testimony was short. He had driven Maxwell to 2 visits. He had waited near enough to see slips of paper passed. He had heard Maxwell tell the former stableman that the words should appear exactly as written if he wished to be paid for his trouble. Maxwell called him a liar. Leopold did not defend the witness. He asked dates. The coachman answered them. He asked where the carriage had stood. The coachman answered that too. He asked what he had actually heard, and when the man began to add an opinion of Maxwell's character, Leopold cut him off. Observed conduct only. Vivienne closed her eyes for one moment. 6 weeks earlier, she might have feared that correction meant Leopold was weakening the witness. Now she understood. "I was removing everything Maxwell could attack." The solicitor's voice became cautious after that. When Leopold asked by what authority the first removal had been arranged before the conflicting settlement was examined, even Maxwell's solicitor would not call the act regular. He said only that his client had believed family consent would follow. Whose consent, Leopold asked. No one answered. At last, Maxwell abandoned law and returned to rank. "She is a servant." Leopold's reply came without heat. "That is true. She has no place setting the terms of a gentleman's family. That does not follow. She has bewitched this entire house against me. Also, not evidence." Vivienne covered her mouth to keep from laughing at the worst possible moment. Then came the quiet scratch of Leopold's pen. The clerk's quill paused once, waiting. Maxwell's solicitor did not look at his client. The petition before this inquiry is struck, Leopold said. The settlement is entered with my finding. Oliver remains in his mother's care. No removal is to be attempted on the strength of the affidavits before me. Mr. Mowbray is not to enter the Dower House grounds or seek another interview with the boy through this estate. Maxwell began to protest. Leopold continued. Mrs. Carlisle's employment and residence stand under the written arrangement already made and are not conditional upon any private relation with me. If you challenge the family settlement elsewhere, this record, including your signature, the witness testimony, and the circumstances of the attempted removal will accompany that challenge. The protest stopped. And if you send another carriage without lawful authority, Leopold added, I will treat it as a disturbance of this estate and act accordingly. A long silence followed. Then a chair shoved back. Footsteps crossed the library. The outer door opened and shut. Vivienne did not move until she heard carriage springs complain in the courtyard. Hooves struck gravel. The wheels rolled away. Empty again. She returned to the Dower House before Leopold left the manor. Oliver was in the music room, trying to make the violin sound less like an argument. Vivienne sat at the writing desk and copied the same line of music twice before noticing. The metronome ticked on the mantel. For the first time since coming to Hawkridge, safety itself left room for another fear. Leopold's work was finished. No petition required him to cross the oak path now. No affidavit waited on her table. He was a duke, and she was still a widowed woman who had worn a servant's cap in his household. Perhaps duty had been the only bridge between those facts. Perhaps with the case closed, good sense would quietly remove it. Vivienne looked at the empty chair he usually took during Oliver's lessons. She had fought too hard for a life that did not depend upon a man to ask him to fill that chair. The thought did not make the room less empty. At last there was a knock. She opened the door herself. Leopold stood on the step without papers. Is it finished? She asked. The petition is. Only then did she breathe fully. He gave her the facts in his usual order. The settlement entered Maxwell's access denied through Hawkridge. The attempted removal recorded her wages and residence unchanged. No one can take Oliver from this estate on the strength of those papers, he said. If Maxwell tries another route, he must answer the record we made today. Vivienne looked past him at the oak path. For weeks, every sound of wheels had tightened something beneath her ribs. The lane was empty. Thank you, she said. Leopold inclined his head, accepting the words, without enlarging them into a debt. My duty in the petition is complete. There was the smallest pause. May I come tomorrow at 4, if Oliver is practicing? The question was so modest that it nearly undid her. He was not asking whether she would remain at Hawkridge. That had already been settled by work. I was not asking whether safety had purchased affection. Safety was written without it. He was asking for an hour after duty had given him no reason to ask for anything at all. Vivienne glanced at the metronome. At 4, she said. As Leopold. For once his answer was not a correction. Yes. 6 months later, autumn rain rattled softly against the Dower House windows. Nothing in Vivienne's safety depended upon what Leopold felt for her. That fact had survived the summer. Her wages came on the same day each month. Copied music left her desk for the main house. The gardener's daughters still arrived twice a week. 2 more estate children had joined them, which meant the parlor was often too small and never quiet. Gossip had not vanished. It had merely been starved of useful facts. Vivienne worked. Oliver lived with her. The Duke visited openly at appointed hours and left when he said he would. Courtship, when it came, had come afterward. That afternoon, Oliver was murdering the final measure of a sonata. Leopold sat in the corner chair, no magistrate's coat in sight, though his posture remained as exact as ever. His fingers began tapping the armrest. 1, 2, 3, 4. You are rushing the cadence. Oliver stopped playing. I knew you would say that. Because it is true. Vivienne rose from her writing desk and moved the metronome weight down 2 notches. Leopold stared at it. You have altered the measure after the evidence was heard. Your justice is impeccable, she said. Your tempo is impossible. Oliver grinned. That is exactly what you did to Uncle Maxwell. Leopold considered the accusation with grave attention. There are distinctions. 6 pages of them, Oliver asked. Vivienne laughed before Leopold could answer. He looked toward her, and the expression in his eyes still had the same quality that had first unsettled her over 3 hostile affidavits' attention without possession. 6 months had warmed it, not changed it into something simpler. Oliver tried the passage again. This time the final note landed where it should. Acceptable, Leopold pronounced. High praise, Vivienne said. I am known for extravagance. Oliver carried his violin to its case, announcing that he was hungry enough to forgive both of them. Leopold turned to Vivienne. Since the performance has concluded, may I remain for supper? She used 1 foot to draw the spare chair nearer the table. You may, if you promise not to count the bread slices. He rose. I make no promises regarding bread. Vivienne rested a hand briefly on his shoulder as she passed him, and he covered it with his own for 1 quiet second. On the mantel, the mahogany metronome kept ticking beside Oliver's imperfect music. Leopold still kept the beat. Vivienne still changed it when the room required breathing. Neither of them mistook the measure for the whole of life. The end.